So with that, Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Vakratunda Mahakaya Surya Koti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kuru Me Deva Sarva Karyeshu Sarvada Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambham Karishyami Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Gurureva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. All right, so there we are. So please repeat after me. Vedo nityam adhiyatam Tatudidam karma svanushtiyatam Tene shasya vidhiyatam Apachitihi Kamye matistyajyatam Papogaf paridhuyatam Bhavasukhe Toshonusandhiyatam Atmecha vyavasiyatam Nijagrahat Turnam vinirgamyatam Sangat satsu vidhiyatam Bhagavato Bhaktir dridadhiyatam Shantyadif parichiyatam Dridataram Karmashu santyajyatam Sadvidvanupasripyatam Sadvidvanupasripyatam Pratidinam Tatpaduka sevyatam Brahmaikaksharamardhyatam Shruti Shiro Vakyam Samakarnyatam Vakyarthasya Vicharyatam Shruti Shiraf Pakshas Samashriyatam Dustarkat Suviramyatam Shruti Matas Tarkonusandhiyatam Brahmasmiti vibhavyatam Aharahar Garvav parityajyatam Deheham matirujyatam Buddhajanair Vadav parityajyatam. Okay, so we'll try chanting all three verses together. Vedo nityamadhiyatam tadudidam karma svanushthiyatam tene shasya vidhiyatam apachitihi kamye matistyajyatam papogaf paridhuyatam bhavasukhe doshonusandhiyatam atmecha vyavasiyatam nijagrihat turnam vinirgamyatam sangat satsu vidhiyatam bhagavato bhaktir dridadhiyatam shantyadif parichiyatam dridataram karmashu santyajyatam sadvidvanupasripyatam pratidinam tatpaduka sevyatam brahmaikaksharamarthyatam shrutishiro vakyam samakarnyatam vakyarthasya vicharyatam shrutishiraf pakshas samashriyatam dustarkat suviramyatam shrutimatasterkonusandhiyatam brahmasmiti vibhavyatam aharahar karvah parityajyatam deheham matirujyatam buddhajanair vadav parityajyatam. So one trick I found in chanting is take really deep breaths and just keep going. So we had seen that up in Shruti Shiro Vakyam Samakarnyatam, that we have to stay focused on why we came to study the Shastras in the first place. Shruti Shiro, Shiro means the head, the main point, the main destination of why we're here. And we saw that the ultimate truth, the ultimate knowledge we're striving for is that Atma Jnana, Brahma Nishtha. And so every Vedas culminate in Vedanta, Antas of the Vedas, the very end of the Vedas. Another word for it is Upanishads. And in each of those Upanishads, the famous, most important statements are being given. They're called as Mahavakyas. So this is where that Shruti Shiro is all about. That Mahavakya, do I know and understand and come to experience the truth of such great statements? Now, we had seen last time that these Mahavakyas have a formula. And these formulas are consistent wherever they occur. So don't worry about any arguments. How many Mahavakyas are there? You can say there's one. You can say there's four. You can say there are many. So the formula is Jiva Brahma Aikya. Jiva is the individual or the microcosm. Brahma is that ultimate substratum, the macrocosm. This and that, this individual, this microcosm, and that macrocosm are Eka, Aikyam, that they're one and the same. This is the formula. And I have to make a correction from last satsang. I misheard misheard the satsang I was studying and misread my notes. The famous Mahavakya, where I said it comes from Taittiriya Upanishad, it's actually from Aitreya Upanishad, and I misheard it. There are both Upanishads there, they're both valid, but the Mahavakya, Prajnanam Brahma, comes from Aitreya Upanishad, which is a representative of Rigveda. So I just want to make that correction from last time. So, that those three elements, microcosm, macrocosm, one and the same, upon hearing it, it doesn't make any sense. Why? Because if you look at each of the individual parts, the properties on the superficial level look very different. In fact, they're opposing each other. So let's take the example we saw. Ishvara, by definition, is Sarva Vyapi, Sarva Shakti, and Sarvagnya. Sarva means all. So all-knowing, all-pervasive, and all-powerful. He has every Shakti, every ability within him. This is Tat, that Brahman, that macrocosm. Now, is that the same qualities I have as the individual? No. The very fact I'm saying an individual means I'm limited. I am not sarvavyapi. And I'm constantly struggling to know more and more things, so I'm not sarvagnya. And every day I set a New Year's resolution to learn a new skill because I'm not sarva shaktiman. So how can, in this level of analysis, tattvam asi be a true statement? How do I deal with that? That is why we separate, in this sannyasi ashrama, we have 3 stages. Shravanam, mananam, and nididhyasanam. Shravanam, when we sit by the Guru, do the seva of his padukas and ask him for that Atma Jnana, that Shravana, upon hearing the Mahavakyas, removes the absence of knowledge. It only removes absence of knowledge. Nobody else is going to tell us that there is such a thing called Atma, that there is such a thing called Brahman, that there is something called something changeless, something infinite, something that is immortal. No other source is there to tell us about this. So Shravana only removes absence of knowledge. What does Mananam do then? Upon hearing this, there is a contradictions of knowledge. Contradiction of knowledge. I have to resolve those contradictions. To I'll add the word iva. This one little word, 2-letter word, was drilled into our heads during our Vedanta course. Iva means as if, seemingly. So I have to always put that, seeming contradictions. Iva contradictions. They are not actual contradictions because the Shraddha is the Shastras do not have false information. They cannot make one statement and give another statement that looks like it goes against the other and have both of them to be true. That, again, this is Shraddha that comes out. Iva contradictions, seeming contradictions. This is the process of Mananam. Can I now sit and do vichara, go through each and every aspect and resolve those seeming contradictions? This is going to take the longest time. This is going to take the most amount of effort. Shravanam happens within a second. In fact, we've been having Shravanam every single day, every single moment. Anytime you turn on a YouTube channel, anytime you turn on a satsang, it's there. But the Mananam is when it has to sink. Now, I wanted to take a little bit of a, not necessarily a tangent because it's still on topic, but take a sidestep into understanding what Shraddha means. What does faith actually mean in our Shastras at this point in our studies? Because we see here, after Vakyarthasya Vicharyatam, Vakyam, those Mahavakyams, Artha, those meanings, I'm doing vichara on it, trying to resolve those seeming contradictions. Shruti Shiraf Pakshas Samashriyatam. May I take refuge in the truth of Brahman as given in the Upanishad. This is the next pada in that verse. May I take refuge. This becomes really important in the middle of inquiry because inquiry is based on logic, not faith. Inquiry is based on logic and not faith. And yet, we require Shraddha in this process. We saw in the previous verse, Shantyadif, Shanti, etc. Shama, Dhamma, Uprama, Titiksha, Shraddha, Samadhanam. Shraddha was an important qualification. So, faith here is to assume that any statement given to me is essentially valid. Any statement given to me is essentially valid. This is based on faith. We are not starting our inquiry wondering if this is right or wrong. That if we do start that way, we are weak in our Shraddha. And I bring this point up because this is the most common way our students ask questions. Is this right or wrong? How do you know? Prove it to me before I accept. And honestly, we also have some doubts as well. Because one of the statements or thought that came up was, we haven't grown up in a Vedic tradition, Vedic culture. Our society is not Hindu by nature. We haven't grown up in a Gurukula system. The cultural understanding is very different. Another thought that came up, especially when we were talking with the teachers, is When we were growing up, if you entered a classroom and you saw a teacher, you have to give respect no matter who that person is. How you show respect is also unsaid rules. It's taught to you without being taught to you. Okay, pay attention, don't interrupt, stand up, be attentive, look them in the eye. Whatever they say, you accept. Don't argue unnecessarily. Don't object to them and be rude. These are unsaid assumptions of how you show respect. However, is that the case we see in our classrooms? I would say no. In fact, they're kind of like sitting back, they have their phone, and they're like, yeah, is that true? How? Why? They expect you to put in effort to earn their respect. So it's almost like flipped on its head. And I'm sure this is experienced even at home. So there's this foundation that has to be changed in order for there to be a good bridge of communication, a good bridge of understanding. So we have to come back and revisit, what does Shraddha and faith actually mean? So here, when we say Shraddha, and I will now consistently use the word Shraddha because the word faith has other meanings to it. I don't want to confuse it with other interpretations. I'm going to use the word Shraddha from now on. Shraddha means we consider something as valid, and by inquiry, we come to find out it to be valid. It sounds like I said the same thing twice, but I didn't. I consider it to be valid, then by inquiry, I come to find that it is valid. So it's not just an emotional aspect. There's a very intellectual aspect when we say, how do I practice Shraddha? So we've discussed before that there's an intellectual appreciation based on prior experience. Based on prior experience. I have come to this building many, many times. The roof has stayed up. Therefore, I have Shraddha that this will stay up. There's an unsaid Shraddha right there. Because of my past experience, I know what to expect. That assumption is also a form of faith or Shraddha. So, one example is even nature has this assumed Shraddha. Take the example of birds. Early in the morning, the sun hasn't even risen, and what are they doing? Chirping away, expecting and praising the sun. It used to annoy me like crazy. During middle school and high school, I was the one that would pull all-nighters, go to bed at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. And when do these birds start chirping? We had a really luscious oak tree right outside of my window, and there were at least 4 or 5 different nests in there. 4 o'clock in the morning, they're chirping away, and I'm like, I wish I was in Texas. I could have a gun and shoot them. Anyway. But they would be really annoying in the morning because they're anticipating that sunrise. Where does their Shraddha come from? Prior experience. Every morning since they were a chick, they found out that every morning the sun rises, therefore I shall chirp in celebration of that. So before the sun even rises, they're also chirping. Shraddha is inbuilt into nature. Okay, I'm not a bird. Come on, give me something a little bit more concrete here. Faith is, I know it is true, but I have to find out that it's true. We have faith in so many things. In fact, this is the basis of all of our functionings. So when we go into the dining hall and we have to check, if someone is here and I say, go downstairs and check if the lights are on, what do? We go down, we turn on the switch, or we just go peek our head around and we see that the lights are on and say, yeah, okay. Where is Shraddha in that little scenario? I have Shraddha in my eyes. That what information my eyes give me, I can trust. Now let's say that I have problems with my eyesight and I can't come to rely on it completely. How can I then fulfill those instructions and check if there are lights if I don't trust my own eyes? Another funny example is, how many of us trust our husbands to go find the item in the pantry? Wives are like, I can't trust him. I got to go to do this myself. I have trust in myself. Right? Or I can do the opposite and say, how many times will a wife be able to find the ratchet in the garage? Each of us have our own expertise. There's Shraddha in our own ability to know where things are. Then another one is, what if we had color blindness? Color blindness. If you have something that is green or red, do I trust my eyes? If I don't, then don't I ask somebody else? Where has my Shraddha been transferred? To someone else's eyes, not my own. So every day we use our Shraddha in so many things, and this Shraddha is based on our experience. I thought I had good eyesight, and then one day that information was contradictory to what happened. Now my Shraddha in that sort of shakes. It's based on experience. Then I go ask somebody else, they seem to have told the truth, so now I develop trust in that person. So this idea of experience versus assumption constantly evolves and grows, and this is what strengthens or weakens Shraddha. One other nice example, when it comes to food. When we walk into our mother's home, say, Amma, I'm hungry, give me lunch. As soon as she puts something on the table, don't we, with full faith, consume it happily? But at the same time, if we go to India, we go to a hotel, or in other words, restaurant, aren't we quite suspicious? We look them up. What kind of Michelin stars do they have? Is there good ratings? Is it good food? And then once when we order it, we even ask the waiter, what's good on this menu? Okay, you say dosa and chutney. So they bring it. Do you not taste the chutney first? Why? Because there's suspicion that the coconut may have gone bad. So you ask them, when was this chutney made? When was this dosa batter made? Shraddha is weak. Do we ask the same kind of questions with our mother? She may be a horrible cook. She may forget the coconut was in the fridge for too long, but there's a sense of Shraddha. It's okay. So it goes to show that there are so many different things we do in life that we assume Shraddha in such a strong way. Why can't this be extended and applied to the Shastras? Trust is a very important value. Why is it we're reluctant to apply it to Shastras? So, there is this sense of pramana we have to investigate, because the level or the realm in which we've entered when it comes to Shastra, the content of the Shastras, is something that is even more out there, so ungraspable by the mind that our Shraddha also weakens because of it. So let me first take a ordinary example and then come to apply what it means by contradictory pramanas. So when it comes to food, we have two elements or two organs that give us information. Our nose and our tongue, isn't it? Go home and try this experiment on your kids or your husband or spouse or whoever's at home. Have them sit down, blindfold them, then pick two different items from your fridge. Let's say a lemon and a chutney. Whatever is in your fridge. Two contradictory things. Have them smell the lemon and eat the chutney. Or another one is I've seen someone take eucalyptus oil and bitter gourd. And smell the eucalyptus oil and eat the bitter vegetable. Your perception of that food is so weird. You can't actually recognize what you're eating. It's a fun game to do at home, but it also shows us that there are pramanas that we have. I use the word pramana for a reason, because we think pramana, shastra pramana, guru pramana, whatever the shastras say must be true. That's still not a complete definition of what the word pramana means. So let's bring it back to these senses. What organ is designated to give us data about visual information? Is eyes. Can the nose give me information about colors? Can the hands give me information about colors? No, there's literally no other instrument that can recognize visual data. What about textures? Can my nose tell me what texture is this book or what this texture of this cloth is? There is no other way of knowing except for this sense of touch or the skin. So the pramana for sight is the eyes. The pramana for texture is the skin. So pramana means the means by which I know something. How do I get this data? There's only one way I can do it. So in the same way, when we are now looking at the self, Sat, Chit, Ananda, how am I to know this? How can I confirm this? Can I smell the self? Can I smell consciousness? Can I see bliss? Well, if you find me in deep sleep and you'll see bliss. But can I taste Sat? It doesn't make sense. I can't use what I always use to find something that does not belong in this means of knowing. So at this time, it's not possible for me to recognize that self. Then how am I to know the self? Because this is what my quest has been this entire time. That is why we say Shastras become the pramana for Brahman and Atma. This mind cannot recognize something it cannot capture. Mind only deals with names, forms, limitations around things. If I have a particular space, I draw a circle around it, then my mind can say, it is the circle, it is not the circle. It needs limitations, only then can it function. When I'm trying to point at something that has no limitations, what's the mind supposed to do? It gets stuck. How can that be eternal? How can that be all possibilities all at once? We chant Purnamada. Purna means complete or infinite. That verse says, when I remove infinite from infinite, all that remains is infinite. If I add infinite to the infinite, all that remains is infinite. It is infinite within... Okay, I don't know what that means. The mind literally cannot grasp what is infinity. We have found the limitations of the mind and intellect. So how am I supposed to know this? That is when Shastras become our pramana and my Shraddha should be there. What the Shastras tell me must be true. I have to put in effort to inquire and come to find out what it has to say. There's no other way around it. I can't sit like a high schooler and saying, Shastras, I don't believe you until you prove me and show it to me that it's there. It can't work like that. Even in science, I sound like every other teacher in the classroom. Let me show you the validity of Shastras by bringing in science. But let's take it. When we do mathematics, when we do scientific experimentation, isn't the scientific method in the same manner? Take a hypothesis, assume it's true, set up an experiment to see how it is the case and is not the case, find your conclusion, then compare your conclusion back to your hypothesis and see if it's valid or not. Don't we do that? Can mathematics and physics starts with doubt in validity? This hypothesis is not true. How can you do experimentation on it? You can't. In higher maths, don't we have things called axioms? These are patterns or philosophies that are accepted as true. You learn all mathematical formulas from there, and when you finish your calculations, you come to find that the axioms are true. It happens in math as well. So same formula, same idea has to be developed with Shastras. You cannot start with assuming what the Shastras have to say, I don't believe. You can't go any further from there. So that is why Shraddha in this case is not just emotional, it is an intellectual appreciation. So Puja Gurudev has this quote about Shraddha. Shraddha is faith is knowledge pending discovery. Faith is knowledge pending discovery. So in other words, Shraddha plus time equals discovery. I have to accept what is there, give it time, give it logical application, then I will come to find out it's true. So now we have to deal with Jiva Brahma Aikya and apply the Shraddha. How do I do that? So let me come back to the experiment with the nose, with the tongue, right? The lemon and the chutney. See, we have one data that came from one pramana. We have another data that came from another pramana. When I juxtapose these two pramanas, they did not match and my mind gets all confused. So now I have to do the same thing here. Shastras is one pramana that is telling me that Jiva Brahma Aikyam. And that it is Brahman who is Ekam Advayam, one without a second. These are properties that Shastras tell me. This is pramana number 1. What is my pramana number 2? My daily experience. Pratyaksha pramana is the word that's used. My experience of the world as of right now through this body, mind, and intellect. Pratyaksha pramana. Now, what does my experience feel like? There's not one. There's many. In fact, I can't even find oneness in things. I only see differences. Carpet is different from stage. You are different from that other person. Black is different from white. Everything is plurality. Everything has differences. There is no oneness. Pratyaksha pramana is opposing Shastra pramana, and these two is what I have to resolve. This is what vichara is all about. So, now if we look at the next line, starting from after this, we just saw Shruti Shiraf Paksha Samashriyatam. May I come to take refuge in the truth of Brahman as given by the Upanishad. Refuge means let me have Shraddha. Let me accept what the Upanishad are saying. Let me work with that. After that, it says, Dustarkat Suviramyatam. Dustarka. Tarka means logic, process of analysis. The dustarka, dus or is a negative, like durguna, dustarka. These are perverse arguments. May we not avoid, grammar is getting confused in my head. I have to go backwards between English and Sanskritam. Dustarkat suviramyatam. These false logics may I not do. Or in active voice, avoid perverse arguments, but instead follow the discriminative rationale of the Shrutis. This is the next line. Shruti matas tarko anusandhiyatam. May I follow well the Shruti tarka, the logic presented by the Shrutis. So when we talk about averse arguments or perverse arguments, there are certain logics we can follow that is constructive. It actually brings us to conclusions that make sense and help us discover the truth. But there are other arguments that are destructive in nature. They're pointless. They don't actually get us anywhere. It's not helpful. So we have to learn what logic is useful and what logic is not useful. So sometimes we hear in our, if you look at biographies of any Shishyas, and they have these immense debates, like Ashtavakra Gita, or Sureshwaracharya ji with Adi Shankaracharya ji. They had massive debates. And you have to be a stalwart and intellectual in the Shastras to be able to even enter those debates. Why? Because not only do you have to have command over the content itself, but you also need to know how to present arguments. What is a valid argument? What is not a valid argument? So for example, if I'm saying, this is Brahma, these are the properties, this is how it's proved. I can't come in saying, yeah, but banana is yellow. You're like, okay, yeah, it's a true logic, but what does that have to do with what we're doing? There's a guideline of how to have arguments. And by the way, the facilitator, the judge between Adi Shankaracharya ji and Sureshwaracharya ji, do you know who was facilitating the argument, the debate? Who would say this is valid, this is not valid, this was a successful win, and this was unsuccessful? Who was the mediator? Does anyone know? Sureshwaracharya ji's wife. Meaning, just there's a tangent now, even women were just as educated during those times that she herself could step in and mediate a debate between them. And she was so objective that she wasn't influenced that she was Sureshwaracharya ji's wife. She literally stuck to what was logical, what is not logical, what is valid, what is not valid. And by the end, Adi Shankaracharya ji was able to convince Sureshwaracharya ji that your logic doesn't make sense. These are the fallacies, therefore why would you continue to follow the untruth? So these debates were not about converting people. It's about finding the truth, and when you find something invalid, why would you follow it? So when it comes to dustarka, I wanted to share, to get a little bit more insight of what we mean by avoid perverse argument. When we say a conversation, a debate, there are actually 4 kinds. Shastras classify 4 types of debates or arguments. You may have heard of this. It is samvada, vada, jalpa, and vitanda. 4 types of arguments or conversation 2 people can have. Samvada means, vada means speech. Samvada means good speech or thorough speech. This, I will take the example of Bhagwan Krishna and Arjuna having a samvada in Gita. Bhagavan Krishna is well established in the knowledge. Arjuna is asking with good shraddha, what is this knowledge? Teach me. And there's a productive conversation. This is samvada. Vada is when there are two equals that are trying to have a conversation about seeking the truth. See, in this case, Bhagavan Krishna is not the same as Arjuna. I wouldn't classify them as equals. One is more knowledgeable than the other. But here, Vada means there are two equals, like two students trying to figure out the concept that's being taught. So Vada is, their goal is the truth. I want to know what is meant by Sat, Chit, Ananda. I'm trying to understand its nature. Therefore, we'll start debating. Okay, when you say existence, Sat, what is considered as real? What is considered as unreal? What is existence? What is not existence? When you start discussing, seeking for the truth, this is called as Vada. Now the other two, now we're going to the negative side. Jalpa. Jalpa is when the ego comes into play. Everybody has something to prove. I am right. Jalpa is when you only present arguments to show that you're right and they're wrong. It doesn't matter if you're holding on to the truth or not. No, I was right. So a lot of times when you look at arguments between husband and wife, tell me I'm right, tell me you're sorry. So at some points when we get into the emotional aspects, when we identify as the ego and we've lost sight of truth, I want to make sure that I am right. This is called as Jalpavada. Then what's the worst one of them all? Vitanda. Vitanda is very peculiar. This is when a discussion is being taken up by two individuals. One of them has no goal in mind. They don't have, they're not trying to prove that they're right. They're not trying to prove the truth about anything. All they're there to do is prove and argue against the other person just for the sake of argument. They have no other goal. They just want to mess with you. Or I like to call it, these are the devil's advocates. Just for the sake of argument, they're arguing. This is called Vitanda. So you have Samvada, Vada, Jalpa and Vitanda. Jalpa and Vitanda are not constructive arguments to be had. They can be very logical. They can be very persistent, but they aren't constructive in any manner. Vada and Samvada, depending on who is speaking and who's qualified or not and for what purpose, that defines it as Samvada and Vada. This is what is being talked about when trying to manage the logic of the Upanishad. So, Dustarkat Suviramyatam, Shruti Shiraf Pakshas Samashriyat. Did I say that right? No. Shruti Matas Tarkonusandhiyatam. May I avoid such Jalpa and Vitanda, and may I stick to Vada and Samvada so that I may follow that logic. Now, when we say certainly follow the discriminative rationale of the Shrutis, this is that second part. What does that mean? See, we're entering a realm that is content beyond the mind. We're entering the realm that is beyond the mind. So, for the mind to even delve into it, it has to follow the guidelines of the Upanishads. And we had seen last time, each Upanishad has a different style of approach, different set of logic that will try to indicate that which cannot be indicated. Yeah, I'm using these terms again and again because these are classic phrases. Trying to indicate that which cannot be indicated. If you're trying to say that, let me take an analogy here. If there's a 3-year-old and you're trying to point the moon, how would you point out the moon to them? Will you say, go to, Houston, Texas, get on a rocket ship, learn how to man it, go out of the atmosphere and go a couple thousand million miles more, and you will land on the moon? That is the moon. Is that how you're going to indicate the moon to a 3-year-old? No. What do? We say, okay, do you see in that field, do you see that tree? Do you see that fruit that's hanging off of that tree? Do you see the edge of that branch? Now, do you see 2 stars, some really bright lights next to those branches? And then you see this big circle. That circle is the moon. Okay, so in that case, is the branch in the same world or realm as that moon? No, it's here in this plane. The stars is somewhere else. The moon is somewhere. Literally, there's no connection. And yet, those jumping of references made it easy for that kid to find the moon in the sky. So in the same way, when the Shastras is trying to indicate that which is beyond the mind, how is the mind supposed to get there? So it says, okay, you follow this logic. The mind follows those logic and you jump to something that is out of this mind. Okay, what do you mean by that? Can you be more specific? So here, the sequence of arguments by which the rishis deny the 5 sheets, panchakoshas, the reasons arrayed to examine the 3 states of consciousness, the logical processes elaborated in the Upanishads to show the one changeless self, the sole substratum of the universe of multiplicity and change. All of these can be immensely helpful, can immensely help a student to purify the intellect and to heave forward and awake to the dimensionless state of the pure consciousness divine. That's one thing I warn you about Puja Gurudev's writing. His sentences are very long. So break it up into clauses. Whenever you're reading his work, there are segments within that sentence that he's talking about. So he says, there are arguments, styles of logic that's given. One is 5 Panchakosha Viveka. That's a classic statement or title for this strategy. 5 sheets. So in other ways, if you look at the BMI chart, this body, mind, and intellect, there are 5 layers. I said 3, 5, give or take, right? 5 layers. Am I this? Am I this? Am I this? Can I prove? Am I this or not this? What logic shall I present? Am I the body made of 5 elements? Am I the pranas, the 5 prana? Prana, apana, vyana, udana, samana. Am I that? Am I my mind? Am I my intellect? Am I the thoughts? Am I that ignorance in that? These are the 5 sheets. I'm just quickly summarizing them. We'll get into this a little bit later. Am I this or am I not this? What is the logic presented? So this is one style of analysis that the Upanishads will guide us through this logic. Another style is what he mentioned, avastatraya viveka. We saw in the previous class, Om, right? Ma defines waking, dream, and deep sleep. Am I these 3 states of experience? How? Why? Is it true? If there's another homework assignment this week at some point, watch the movie Inception. I really do mean it. Go watch that movie because they have a very interesting question they propose in that movie. If I'm in the waking state and I go to sleep and enter a dream state, that dream state feels very real. And then what do they do in that movie? They go into another layer of dream state, dream within a dream within a dream. But the premise is, if I've gone 5 layers, have I kept track and have I come back out of those 5 layers? How do I know which is real, which is a dream state, which is a waking state? So I thought that movie was really cool in analyzing that. How do we know that we're in a waking state and not a dream state? So this kind of logic and style is another style in which the Upanishads give us logic. There's another one. These 5 elements, especially when we come to questions about creation, the macrocosm, how was this world created? Why do we have these yugas? Then how is it that, what dissolves at the end of this kalpa or these 4 yugas? How does it dissolve? Talk to me in that logic. Then we analyze, okay, you have subtle forms of the 5 elements. They mix and recombine each other. Then you have the gross aspect of the 5 elements. Then they make up the world, the mind, the intellect. Then upon dissolution, they revert back. So anyway, they present all of these logics as well. How do I know what is the truth of things? What is that which remains in all 3 periods of time? What is that which is changeless? What is that which is consistent in all variations? Because we see here, and this was that last part of that sentence here, The self is the sole substratum of the universe of multiplicity and change. Here, Puja Gurudev is juxtaposing two experiences. Self is alone and one and changeless. The universe is of multiplicity. How is this the substratum of that? And his last statement is, when we try to follow these logics, it will purify the intellect to heave it forward and wake up to the dimensionless state of the pure consciousness. How do I go beyond that intellect? How do I indicate the moon by using stuff in this world? So this is the strategy in which the Upanishads say. So we need to have a little bit of Shraddha. Let me accept the premises, the axioms, the hypotheses that the Shastras start off the logic with. Let me stay adherent to the logic presented. Let me see if I can follow along with it. Then let me see, does it make sense to me in the hypothesis they originally made? This is to resolve any seeming contradictions I may have come about. This is mananam, in trying to resolve what is the true meaning behind Jiva Brahma Aikyam. So, again, the three statements we looked at today was Vakyarthascha Vicharyatam. Constantly reflect upon the commandments of the Upanishad. Shruti Shiraf Paksha Samashriyatam. May I take refuge in the truth of Brahman. Then, Dustarkat Suviramyatam. Avoid averse arguments. And finally, Shruti Matas Tarko Nusandhiyatam. May I certainly follow the rationale of the Shrutis. This is all constituting what is that mananam process. So let's have, the goal is find the meaning. May I have the Shraddha to accept the logic. May I avoid unproductive arguments. And may I follow along in the logic presented in the Upanishad. So this is the content we were seeing in verse number 3. We shall see more, and we will continue the mananam process. So what's coming up ahead is, be absorbed in the attitude that I am Brahman, renounce the pride, give up the idea that I am the body, and give up arguments with the wise. So we're going to expand a little bit more on these ideas in this verse. So with that, we are going to come to the conclusion of today's satsang. And before we leave, may I ask if we can have the QR code? Yes. So usually in January, we make New Year's resolutions. We want to improve ourselves. But of course, being Hindus, we want to incorporate seva as an important component of our own self-improvement. Karma Yoga is selfless action dedicated to a higher altar. So our purpose in mission is to provide those opportunities. And I would highly recommend, take some time this week, go to this site here, what is it? bit.ly/Chinmaya DFW Seva. This is a Google form. In one of the drop-downs, you'll see all the different areas we need help with. And we would love to harness your talents. You know, one of the aspects of Karma Yoga is sublimate our vasanas. I have all these tendencies. May I put it to good use as a service to others. So whatever you're good at, whatever you like to do, whatever talents you have, we want to find an opportunity that best matches that. So look through it, see what resonates with you. If nothing is speaking to you, come to speak to me then. Then we'll find out what is something you would like to do. Is there areas we haven't considered? Are there talents you have that we can utilize that we didn't even think about? So this is a community, this is a family. So I thought I would bring it up today saying, as this New Year resolution, make seva and yajna as a part of that resolution. Here are wonderful opportunities. Just more specifically, we'll have camps coming up. We'll need a lot of help there. And especially if you're a doctor, there are 2 camps I would definitely like to get your help. And I know your schedules are very, very packed, and I have to ask ahead of time. There is one camp coming up in April, our high school camp. And in July, so I'm giving you 6 months heads up time, July 1st to July 5th, we have our J-Chick camp, and we need a doctor who can be there with us during the camp to help make sure no kids get harmed. And if something were to happen, we need a pramana. We need a reliable source that can help us handle that. So these are just some examples of opportunities where we need help. So I just wanted to encourage everyone to take the opportunity. Yes. So we have a separate wing where mission goes out and does seva for other organizations. So for example, the umbrella program we had in California with the fires that are happening in Los Angeles, Chinmay Mission Los Angeles is providing seva for others. So we as a family member will go out into the community and do projects. So those are different seva projects that we're talking about. Yeah. So any other questions? Okay. If not, we'll do closing prayers. And again, thank you for this opportunity for satsang. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om.